Hi everyone, welcome back to Simply Legal. I'm usual host Terry Kahuma on this channel, and as usual we have our most favorite guest, who is the old man of the clan, Mr. Andrew Mwenda, and he's going to discuss, or we are going to discuss, a very prevalent issue, and I think he can even be able to introduce the topic himself.
The M23 issue.
Yes.
So first of all, I was so surprised I was not surprised, but shocked. There is this group called the UN Panel of Experts. When you hear panel of experts, be very, how can I say, suspicious of these things. If you attach something called expert on someone, then all of a sudden you confer upon them a particular status as if they have so much knowledge about the subject. The UN Panel of Experts, I would like to meet them as a group. I don't think they're experts on Congo whatsoever. They have very little knowledge of Congo. So I give you a background of the story. M23 people, an anonymous guy called me and said, M23 leaders are in Kampala, they would like to meet you. Initially, I thought they wanted to meet me as a journalist. But when we met and I listened to them here in this office for the first 20-30 minutes, I realized the issues they had to discuss are so important, I need time, and I had another appointment. So I asked them, can you come back tomorrow? So the next day, I freed my entire afternoon. We spoke here for about 5 hours. And what they told me was so interesting. They said in 2020, after Tshisekedi was elected president, he invited them to Kinshasa, the leaders of M23. They stayed there in a hotel for 14 months. They negotiated with the government of Congo and arrived at a peace agreement which was signed by both parties. Then they went into implementation, and the implementation of that peace agreement required that M23 soldiers be integrated into the Congolese army because they were actually members of the Congolese army. They even discovered that they were still in the Congolese army. Many of them had been receiving promotions and salaries which they never saw, right? So this, and they said, when they asked to be transferred from Eastern DRC to Congo, near the border with Angola, to be integrated, the government of Congo wasn't able to organize logistics for 1 year for them to be taken. So one day they were attacked by forces of the government of Congo after they had surrendered their weapons and they were waiting to be taken to Western DRC. And they have tried to reach DRC, the government in Kinshasa, to know what happened to the peace agreement, and there is no communication. We would like to reach out to the embassies of the Western world, especially the Americans, the French, the Belgians, and the EU. Since they have influence in Kinshasa, they can talk to the government there, and we go back to our peace agreement, which was that we surrender. What a great opportunity for Africa to have these people willing to surrender on the basis of the terms of the peace agreement they had signed. I was also aware, by the way, that the South African community had negotiations with the government of Congo, where they had arrived at the following conclusion: that M23 have legitimate grievances and are making legitimate demands. Since there is a peace agreement standing between Kinshasa and them, East Africa will deploy a force to stand between the two belligerents so that the terms of the peace agreement can be implemented. So we need someone to influence Kinshasa. I call the Americans, the French, and the EU. The French refused to participate. The EU came and talked to them at length for 4 hours, 5 hours, and the EU official who talked to them wrote voluminous notes and said, I'm doing this informally, because you're not supposed to talk to these people. The Americans said, no, we'll get our political secretary to talk to them, but we need permission from Washington, D.C. 2 days later, they called and said, Washington, D.C. has refused to give permission. I said, fine. If you cannot meet with these people, you can use your CIA, an intelligence arm, to open informal negotiation, informal contact between them and DRC. Normally, peace talks begin like that. Open a channel of communication using your intelligence agencies. And I even told the French the same thing. Be talking to DRC. It can lead to the peaceful resolution of the conflict. The Americans went to Afghanistan and had just finished reading a book called The Afghanistan Papers. The Americans went to Afghanistan to fight the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. But with the time they realized that Al-Qaeda was a jihadist movement with global ambitions. The Taliban were a nationalist movement with Afghanistan ambitions. They lumped them together for 20 years. They fought, lost many soldiers, about 6,000 of them, even spent $2 trillion. Finally left power to the Taliban. Essentially, they invaded the country, occupied it for, removed the Taliban, spent 20 years, $2 trillion, and replaced the Taliban with the Taliban. So, to avoid such mistakes in Congo, rather in Afghanistan, America opened informal channels of communication with the Taliban. These informal channels led to formal negotiations in Doha, led by the Qataris, which led to Americans withdrawing from Afghanistan and leaving that country to the Taliban, right? So, but Americans had declared them a terrorist organization. It is easier for you to label your opponent anything, but eventually you may end up talking to this person. So the same is happening with Israel and Hamas. What Hamas did on October 7th is inexcusable. Israel's response is genocidal. It isn't that you have two angels or you have a devil fighting an angel. It's not true. So Israel is talking to Hamas. The US talking to Taliban. Kinshasa needs to talk to M23. If you hold these very tough positions and say there cannot be talks, that country will never end those conflicts. So here was an opportunity. The Americans refused. The Americans, I suspect, are the ones who went and reported to the UN. Mwenda is brother. They created their own story. I don't know what the interests are, and I really don't give a fuck. And they want this one to be put. They can kill me, they can take me to jail, they can do anything. Because I am so convinced that I was doing the right thing. And even today, I appeal to the Americans, they need to open a channel of communication between M23 and Kinshasa. That is the only path to a peaceful DRC, unless Americans have an interest in instability in that country. So that is point number one. So the UN panel of experts is not a panel of experts because I have read their report. It's full of nonsense, misunderstandings, and idiotic statements. If they understood what is happening there, they would not have written that nonsense that they wrote. They need to understand the conflict for what it is. There is a threat to the Tutsi Banyamulenge in Eastern DRC. Every day they face threats of extermination. I have thousands and thousands of videos on my phone of Congolese leaders, including the Congolese army, making statements that these people should be exterminated. How can the world accept that? So me and Rwanda, I live in a world where the UN is saying that a group that is facing a threat of extermination should be called a terrorist organization, or a group that's trying to defend them. Okay, M23 may have made mistakes, but the mistakes of M23 cannot take away the legitimate interests of the Banyamulenge people there, or the Tutsi Banyarwanda. They kill their cows, they grab their land, they kill their children, rape their women. What is that?
They're taking away their livelihood.
So that is one. And I don't give a damn. I don't care really what the UN Security Council and anybody else thinks. Now, if the world, the whole world of 8 billion, sided with the genocidal forces, I and Mwenda, I'm willing to stand as one person, die, go to jail, defending something I'm so morally convinced about. So that is what I wanted you to know. But the other issue I wanted to raise is here in Africa. Congo joined the East African community. It sat in Nairobi. We agreed on the Nairobi process. The Nairobi process said, these people have legitimate demands and legitimate grievances. Let us create a framework through which we can bring you together. Tshisekedi signed onto it. Kenya and Uganda deployed. One day he woke up without consulting the fellow leaders of East Africa. He dismissed these forces. How do you act in an association? You are a member of the EU. You have agreed on certain things. You withdraw unilaterally. So it shows you the poor behavior of African leaders. And I'm also unhappy with East African leaders because they needed to call him and say, no, if we sit in a community and agree, it is important that you honor your word. You can't disregard. Then he calls SADC, of which he's a member. If I was President Ramaphosa and other people in SADC, it was important for them also to consult the East African community and say, no. You are a member of the East African community, but also a member of SADC. There is the East African process. Why are you walking away from it for us to intervene? So this is the failure of Africans to work together. This failure to work together is what led to colonialism. It is what tore us apart during the Cold War. Now we are entering a new Cold War. We need Africans to understand that African problems should primarily be solved by African institutions, regional and continental. So the third issue I felt in this is the Rwanda process. This Rwanda process involves the disputes between Rwanda and DRC, mediated by Angola. There is a process taking place there. So we have the Rwanda, then we have the fourth institution called ICGRC, which is the International Conference on the Great Lakes region. I remember when Museveni was chair. It has also been trying to mediate this issue of Congo. There are 200 rebel groups in Eastern DRC. Why point out only M23? Sanction it and declare it a terrorist organization and ignore all the others. Many of these rebel groups are actually working with the government of Congo. They are allied to it. Then you have the FDLR, which is a genocidal group from Rwanda. It is supported by the government of Congo and the Congolese army. But it is a threat to the Tutsi people of Rwanda. It is a negative force that also needs to be fought. If African leaders cannot work together in the South African community, in SADC, in ICGRC, and in the Rwanda process, and coordinate all these institutions and the actions, including the AU, then you allow Europeans and Americans and others to come and insert themselves in our conflicts. But you would be stupid to think that the Americans can get involved in Congo purely for humanitarian reasons. The Americans have their interests, the Europeans have their interests, the French, the Belgians, and Congo has rich mineral resources. We are entering the age of the Cold War. What does the Cold War mean? There is a rivalry between China and the United States. They are involved in competition for influence, competition for power, competition for resources. for resources. So Congo is very rich in mineral resources. It's going to become a playing field. If you're not careful, the rivalry between the great powers to have influence in Congo in order to extract these mineral resources will drag in the neighbors. And we are likely to be hurt. When two elephants fight, always the grass that suffers. Where the grass? So I'm appealing to African leaders, please be very careful. Even you, Tshisekedi, the Americans used and dumped Mobutu, didn't they? They will use and dump this Tshisekedi. They used Museveni, now they are dumping him. They are now trying to use Ruto. Be very careful, because you may achieve short-term tactical benefits, but in the long term, it is their interest that matters. So what are our interests as Africans, and how do we promote them? Using our own processes and institutions. The Rwanda process is one point. ICGRC is an institution. East African Community is an institution. SADC is an institution. AU is an institution.
I have a question. Is there a possibility and benefit of Congo and Rwanda developing a peace treaty? And maybe you could explain to the viewers what a peace treaty is in international relations.
Well, let me put it this way. It can't be a peace treaty from Congo and Rwanda, but Congo and Rwanda can have an understanding. And I think if I was Tshisekedi, and this is how he has started in 2020, when he came to power, he made all the right moves. One, the problem of M23 is not a problem between Rwanda and Congo. It's a problem internal to Congo. If Rwanda is involved, Rwanda is an external actor. It will be exploiting internal incoherencies. Why isn't Rwanda financing an armed rebellion in Uganda, in Tanzania? Why? They are neighbors. It means that Uganda has solved its internal problems. There is no opportunity for Rwanda to do so. Or for that matter, the other argument could be that Uganda does not threaten Rwanda's interests, and therefore Rwanda has no interest. So in other words, we need to look at M23 as a Congolese domestic problem. What is my advice to Tshisekedi? He needs to do three things. First, he needs to repeatedly, in word and deed, demonstrate, argue that the Tutsi Banyarwanda are indigenous to Congo when the borders were drawn, and they are citizens of Congo, and the state of Congo will defend their citizenship rights. That's one. Two, he needs to argue strongly, consistently, and both in deed and in word, that the larger citizens, their rights to property and to life will be protected and defended by the state of Congo. No government official of Congo, no community in Congo should try to expropriate them. The third step we should do, and this is now extant, that the FDLR, which is a genocidal force from Rwanda, has no place in Congo, and Congo will work with everybody, including Rwanda, to eliminate it. If he did those three things, that man will bring peace into Eastern DRC, because then he will realize that Rwanda is a partner, in fighting the genocidal FDLR, and he can have Rwandan troops there to help him, or he can have the South African force to help him do that, or SADC, whoever it is, to finish off FDLR. Two, he will have recognized that M23, as he did under the Rwanda process and as he did in the Nairobi process, M23 have legitimate grievances and legitimate demands. He should meet those grievances and demands. So the problem of Congo is not exotic. It can be solved if Congo leadership, if leadership in Kinshasa devotes itself to what is doing the right thing. Yes, but maybe he profits from spreading anti-Rwandan propaganda. And in Congo, I'm told that when you stand and say, I'm up against Kagame, I'm going to kill him, he's Hitler, I'm going to overthrow him, that's what he has been saying, then the Congolese say, yes, you are our man. Well, if you depend on those sentiments, you can maximize your nuisance value, but you're not going to solve problems of your country. And I wonder whether Tshisekedi has a deep interest in solving the problems of his country. I want to hope that he does. But that's the advice I would give him. So there is already what they call the Rwanda process, where Kagame and the Tshisekedi have been having these discussions, and these discussions need to be reinforced, harnessed, encouraged. And they will involve two things. A, listening to the demands and grievances of M23. Two, fighting FDLR.
Will there be any need for the United Nations conventions on war crimes, because as lawyers we base on those things? If
you insert the UN into Congo's problems, I'm telling you, you will have created a tinderbox, you have opened a Pandora's box. The UN is a very corrupt, bureaucratic institution that cannot be a vehicle for any solution. Let me give you an example. How did we resolve the problems of LRA in Uganda?
UN intervention.
No. Museveni even opened talks with Kony. Uganda government talked to Kony. You see, you can say terrorists. I will not talk to them. You understand? Museveni, you got right in front of you in that chair. Who was seated there? Kwame Rugunda. Museveni sent Dr. Hakana Rugunda to lead talks between Uganda and LRA. LRA was a murderous organization that you can never call a liberation movement or anything. A million times worse than M23. M23 is not like that. So, but what did government of Uganda do? We brought Koyolo here. We brought how many? I can't remember all the soldiers. Achalam. We brought the soldiers of LRA. We integrated them in UPDF, gave them UPDF ranks. They were given vehicles and escorts. Go to Bulu and Kitumu, you'll find them there. So the LRA problem was the Ugandan problem. You try to internationalize it, you have international actors with their own agendas, they will come and rule your suit. They rule your case. The Americans, when they wanted to get out of Afghanistan, they had said the Taliban are terrorists. Whom did they hand over power to? Okay, they ran away, they never handed over to anybody, but they spent 20 years and $2 trillion to replace the Taliban with the Taliban, didn't they? But they acknowledged that the Taliban should take over. They were an external force that could never solve the problem of Afghanistan. They financed an Afghan army, they financed an Afghan police, they financed an Afghan political parties, they promoted human rights. The Americans did every single thing under the book. By the way, I have started admiration for them because when I see what Israel is doing in Gaza, the Americans had what you call a counterinsurgency doctrine. A counterinsurgency doctrine is that you must win the hearts and minds of the population. So the Americans built schools, they built dams, they built roads, they built power lines, they taught kids, they built hospitals and treated the sick and they tended to the injured. They delivered food relief, they delivered electricity and water supplies to people's homes. Americans did all this. They started women's movements, they opened cooperatives, they did so many things to try to improve the lives of the Afghan people. The Afghan people still rejected them, they saw them as alien. They tried to train an Afghan army of 300,000, they trained an Afghan police. They spent so much money, they lost lives. You see, when you see Israel's war in Gaza, there is no plan, a political plan to say we need to win over the hearts and minds of these Palestinians. They're just bombing, killing, they bomb hospitals, they destroy schools, they destroy bakeries, they destroy water treatment plants, they destroy electricity, they destroy all forms of living. The Israeli state has no counterinsurgency doctrine to say Hamas is an evil movement. We are coming to offer you an alternative. Nothing. If anybody cannot, that's why, although I disagree with America's involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan, at least America presented itself for all the torture they did in Iraq and Afghanistan, for all the mistakes they made, bombing civilians. They also had a human face. The Israeli incursion into Gaza has zero human face. How can Americans pretend that somehow they have some morality in Congo when they cannot even have morality in Gaza?
And you know what's even worse is that recently, the ICC, the state attorneys in the ICC were issuing out arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu. So America all of a sudden now started saying this is illegal and what?
No, American not government but senators, I'm sure encouraged by the US state and in collaboration with it, have said if you issue those, they threaten that if you issue those
arrest warrants,
we will put sanctions on you. And the Americans have, I think, sanctioned the chief prosecutor of the ICC because she...
Karim Khan.
Yes, because she was investigating the Netanyahu's genocidal crimes. So anyway, this is hypocrisy, which I understand. I'm sure if I was in American shoes, I'm most likely to have acted exactly like that. The Israeli lobby in American politics is very strong with the Christian right and whatever, so many groups support this. If you're an American president, the most important thing is to get elected. And if to get elected, you need to raise money, and the people who raise money from Israeli lobby, well, you can allow Israel to commit a genocide for your own political interests. I'm not making a moral, I'm stating facts, I'm not trying to make a moral judgment. You see, but for me, my interest is here, in East Africa, that us in Africa, we should as much as possible use our institutions to solve our problems and avoid inviting foreigners. First, like in Uganda, try to solve your problems yourself. Don't allow your neighbors to be the one to come and solve them for you. Once your domestic problems involve your neighbors, like Rwanda has a vested interest in Congo. One, for two reasons. There is FDLR. That's a very important security threat to Rwanda. But there is a second thing. The current government of Rwanda's original legitimacy was that it ended genocide of the Tutsi. Am I correct? Right across the border, 1 kilometer away, there are Tutsi communities there. Can Kigali sit on its arms when a genocide is being committed against the Tutsis? I mean, it's like you have large Jewish settlements in the West Bank, right?
Yes.
Now the West Bank becomes the independent state of Palestine. That Jewish population stays there. Can you commit a genocide against those Jews in the West Bank and Israel sits on its arms? The government in Israel cannot hold that. It's the same for Rwanda. And I don't know what the world wants from Rwanda. I don't know the details. If Rwanda is supporting M23, it's understandable. Because then M23 provided security to the Tutsis in DRC.
So meaning that this is not an issue of whether laws or international laws can work. It's just basic humanitarian ground.
Well, in international system, you believe in international law. What law exists? Really, the international system is a system without hierarchy. So it's an anarchical system. When we say the international system is based on anarchy, it is international laws. Did you say international law?
Yes, I did.
The principle of international law is called the principle of pacta sunt servanda.
Yes.
What does it say? That international laws and obligations will be respected in good faith, because we don't have an international police, like in the municipal law, to enforce those rules. Now, the international police we have is a very pattern police. Sometimes in the United States, security council, whatever it is, these teachers are too weak. In any case, they're so removed from these African problems. Africa is such an insignificant detail in the wider scheme of global power politics. So when they come here, they want to impose textbook solutions on our problems. They import textbook solutions from their countries. Their countries are at a different level of development. They have different social structure, different culture, different everything. So you cannot transplant an experience from America. Institutions that grew out of a particular experience in America and superimpose them on Congo and think they work. In America, those institutions evolved organically out of the social struggles of the American people with the changing social structure. They work well because one, they're manned or supervised and managed by Americans who take so many things, the intangibles, norms, values, habits, attitudes that make the formal structure work. You see, you need to look at the formal structure of the state, but also you need to understand its internal logic. That internal logic is in the psychology of people. Their values, norms, habits, attitudes, and how they've been raised. It works there because of that. Now you take it to Congo. What are the values, norms, habits of the Congolese? Do they rhyme with the American experience? They don't. So you can take the formal structure, but you cannot transplant the internal logic. The formal structure works because of very many informal ties, networks, beliefs, so many intangible elements that make the formal structure work. That's what I'm saying. There is a formal structure, there is internal logic. That internal logic is driven by a network of social ties, shared cultural understandings, values, norms, and habits. But they are not there in Congo. The Congolese have their own habits. So the formal structure will have to be domesticated. And when it is domesticated, then you will find you have a shadow state. One of the reasons we have shadow states here is because the formal structure of the state is not congruent with the existing social reality.
So, Grandpa, what are the final solutions that you think would end this war?
In Congo?
Yes.
The first solution to conflicts in Congo is the Congolese state to understand the legitimate grievances of the different constituent elements that make up Congo and seek to find a political solution to those problems. Even if it pursued a military strategy, military victory on the battlefield has to be transformed into political action on the ground. This is what I was telling you in Israel. Okay, you're going to defeat Hamas. Once you have defeated Hamas, what happens? You must have a political agenda for the people in Gaza. If you are going to defeat M23, after that, what happens? There has to be a political administration of that area. You have to integrate the indigenous people of that community into the management of that society there. So Congo needs to have an internal conversation on how do we integrate the different communities of Congolese into the management of their own affairs. That is one. The second is a lot of the weaknesses of the Congolese state. There is an Abyssinia in the east, have powerful implications on her neighbors. How do we secure the neighbors to ensure that the neighbors do not suffer from the consequences of our Abyssinia state? So you have ADF from Uganda. It's based on a territory. How do we address those concerns of Uganda? You have FDLR for Rwanda. How do we address those problems? You see. So one is in an internal political process inside DRC. And I don't think that we have the current leadership is up to that task. I'm hoping I hope it does. I don't think it does. So the other is rapprochement with partners in the region. And I think that the solutions will begin with the internal institutions of Congo, then the regional institutions, the East African Community, the SADC, the African Union, the ICGRC, and then the Rwanda process. We can have both institutions and processes. Help Congo manage first its internal affairs and then help it manage its external relations.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Grandpa.
We
wanted to get your insight on why they were connecting you to the M23 Rebels. Because that really, it rubbed me off the wrong way because I don't think that is a good thing. Because they were trying to paint you in a bad light. So the UN was trying to...
But the UN panel of experts were not independent people trying to do an analysis. If you read through, they are trying to create something to say Mwenda is a liaison officer between Kigali and Kampala. Who told them? So they want to say that somehow For me to meet M23, maybe I was acting on behalf of Museveni and Kagame. First, I never talked to Museveni that I met M23. I never talked to Kagame about it until this report came out. I never even talked to Mohozi about it. I never even shared it with Rwanda and Intelligence. I considered this to be a matter between me, M23, and these Americans. These people had so much faith in the Americans, the French, and the Belgians, and the EU. Of course, the Americans betrayed everyone, and I'm really, really, really disappointed. Because sometimes, in my naivete, I think that America can play the role of a good man. You get it? To see an opportunity to contribute something positively. But of course, countries have values and interests. Whenever values of a country have interests, countries choose what? Interests.
Okay, Grandpa, any final word to the viewers?
Anyone who knows me, you should not be worried. I really don't give a damn if somebody sanctions me, jails me, or kills me. When I believe in something, I am willing to die for it. I don't really, really, really mind. I could die in a car accident. Why not die for a very important cause?
One final question. If you had the opportunity to, let's say, maybe sue them for defaming your name, would you take the chance?
No, I don't need to sue them. In any case, from defamation, you can't sue. This is a report of the United Nations. It's not it enjoys absolute privilege.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and we'll always host Grandpa on the channel. Until next time, we shall see you. Bye.